I'm watching over my niece, Emily, at my brother's house while he and his wife are on a trip. We discuss plans for tomorrow excitedly. As we talk, Emily surprises me by opening the closet door and sliding in without hesitation. I'm Lily, a 24-year-old housewife with a brother 5 years older. We've always been close since losing our parents. Despite both being married, we maintain a family-oriented relationship. My husband's parents live far away, making it hard to ask for help. My brother and his wife had a quick wedding, and since her fallout with her parents, they rely on our support. Our families have daughters, so my niece, Emily, and my daughter, Alice, grew up like sisters. My brother informed me of their 10th wedding anniversary trip and asked me to look after Emily. I readily agreed and they left. I stayed at their house with Emily, who seemed nervous as her parents left. Initially, I planned to bring my daughter, Alice, but Emily insisted not to invite her. We spent time playing games and preparing dinner together, but Emily remained nervous. When I asked if something was wrong, she kept saying, "I'm fine, nothing's wrong," without telling me. Emily's behavior suggested she was on guard against something invisible. The meaning became clear when bedtime arrived. Changing into her pajamas, Emily suggested going to bed early and starting for Aunt Lily's house in the morning. Opening the closet door, she revealed a set of bedding prepared at some unknown time. As I struggled to understand, Emily quickly laid down on the mattress inside the closet, saying goodnight. Surprised, I blurted out, "Wait, Emily, you're sleeping in there," louder than intended. She replied seriously, assuring it's okay and leaving the closet slightly open in case anything happens. Attempting to hide my confusion, I suggested we sleep together. After a few tries, Emily reluctantly agreed and got into my bed. She asked if it was okay to keep the bedding in the closet as her hiding spot, deepening the mystery. I agreed naturally. Curious, I asked why she needed a hiding place. After making me promise not to laugh, she whispered, "The monster is coming." Initially endearing, the story took a turn. Emily clung to my arm, explaining that the monster is scary and clever, only appearing when Daddy is not around. Her mom drives the monster away, and Emily must stay in the closet until it's safe. Her mom cries while doing so, and Emily tried to help once but found it too scary. When the monster pounded on the closet door and Emily trembled, I sighed, realizing the monster might be real. It wasn't just a trick to get a night owl kid into bed. Caught off guard by my sister-in-law's affair, I didn't know how to handle it. If the monster was her lover, it wouldn't come here when she wasn't around. Emily believed the monster came on days when her father wasn't home. Today, with my brother away, she insisted not to invite my daughter over, always staying by my side, watching the windows and the front door. Thinking about Emily and my trusting brother made me angry at my sister-in-law. But reassuring Emily was my priority. I held her hand and smiled, saying Aunt Lily is here today. The monster is clever, so it might get scared and stay away, seeing a stranger. Also, her mom, the usual target, is with her dad today, making it safe. Emily's face still clouded with anxiety, not knowing the monster's true identity. Over time, she began to fear its imminent arrival. I managed to calm her down, suggesting we hide in the closet together. I assured her she could talk to me about anything bothering her about the monster. Hoping to address each concern and make her feel sleepy, another fact from Emily surfaced. Unable to sit still, I rushed out of the house with Emily still in her pajamas. Quickly driving back home, I explained the situation to my husband, who then headed to my brother's house. Around 10 p.m. that day, my husband and his friends stayed over there. Receiving a call from my brother on vacation, he inquired about Emily's condition. After discussing Emily, he urged me to forget about my husband and daughter, get some rest, and ensure the doors were locked. Sternly told not to leave the house, I struggled to keep my voice steady. Looking at Emily, who was sound asleep with my daughter, I pledged to drive the monster away the next morning. When my husband returned, my body trembled with fear and anger as he shared what happened last night. Relieved that my decision from yesterday was right, I spent the day at home with Emily and my family, waiting for my brother and his wife to pick her up. Upon seeing us, my brother questioned why we left the house during the night, breaking our promise. His strong protest made me uncomfortable. Calmly, I asked how he knew we weren't home while he was on vacation. he revealed he had given Emily a smartphone with GPS. His evasive eyes and persistent insistence on the phone contradicted this claim. Suppressing the urge to confront him immediately, I continued the conversation quietly to avoid the kids hearing. Lastly, he mentioned that two unfamiliar men showed up at my place late last night, leaving me puzzled about their visit to the house. In the middle of the night, intruders came, and my brother's voice trembled when he expressed relief that Emily and I were safe. His gaze, however, seemed more concerned with carefully choosing his words. Pressing him about the suspicious men, I demanded to know who they were. Attempting to prevent further questioning, my sister-in-law loudly called Emily over, insisting they leave. Emily timidly appeared, and her mother forcefully took her hand. Suddenly, my brother changed his demeanor, stating he wasn't forgiving me, but that they were leaving for the day. He started pushing Emily towards the door, despite her clear reluctance to leave. Protesting and trying to stop them, I was ignored. Emily, resisting her parents, reached out towards me. Quickly, I pulled her behind me, sheltering her. My sister-in-law raised her voice in surprise, letting go of Emily's hand. Ignoring us, my brother and his wife spat aggressive words and rushed over. Fueled by anger, my husband and I were determined not to let them take Emily. We managed to force them out of the room, and at the front door, waiting police officers swiftly apprehended my brother and his wife. The disoriented couple argued with the police, claiming they took their daughter from home and locked her up. Insisting on Emily's immediate return, my brother argued that if they don't give her back, they should be detained. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law stood silently by the police officer, not trying to call Emily over. My brother shouted at Emily to come to him, but her refusal, influenced by the severity of her father's demeanor, kept her by my side. Realizing things weren't going his way, my brother yelled in the entrance, but he was completely restrained by the police officer. Witnessing this, my husband pushed his smartphone in front of my brother's face. Seeing that, I told Emily and my daughter to wait once more in the other room and shut the door to avoid them hearing the audio. After confirming this, my husband started playing a video he had recorded at my brother's house the night before. Without uttering a word, my brother and his wife's faces turned pale upon seeing it. The video began with a key slowly turning in the lock of the house, revealing they had used a spare key. Two men quietly entered the room, appearing in high spirits, and greeted each other, mentioning my brother's name. They didn't know they had company, and one of them mentioned a discount because she's his sister, looking over at my husband and his friends. When my husband's friend gave a vague response, one of the men boasted about being good friends with my brother and his wife, getting an even bigger discount, mentioning a specific amount. They mentioned they were lucky to play with the kids today. The profile of the man who laughed sounded grotesque. Although I couldn't see the screen, the audio alone made my skin crawl. My husband's friend then bombarded the men with questions, asking if they often came to this house and if they always came as a pair. Sensing something was off, the men asked where Emily and I were. Seeing my husband's enraged expression as he responded that we're not here, they finally realized the gravity of the situation and quickly fled. Until the very end, they were either unaware of my husband's recording or deliberately didn't mention it. My brother, supposed to be their close acquaintance, seemed to have discovered the existence of the video for the first time and was shaking. Frantically, he stated he didn't know anything and had been framed. Despite my previous belief that my brother was uninvolved and my sister-in-law was the mastermind, the video contained clear evidence of my brother offering up Emily and me. His ignorance wouldn't convince anyone. Consequently, my brother was taken away by the police, and my sister-in-law, feigning ignorance, ended up in custody with him at a later date. The police interrogated my brother and his wife, who eventually confessed to everything and were subsequently arrested. It turned out my sister-in-law had a scheme where she would lure men into their home on the nights my brother worked late shifts, receiving money from them. Realizing a demand for children among certain groups, she carefully exploited Emily in a way that wouldn't break the law. Emily, who knew nothing and was trying to help her bullied mother, was photographed posing as instructed. The pictures were supposed to be innocent photos of a child, but my sister-in-law went out of her way to take these photos with a disposable camera, developing them and showing them to her customers, inducing a bidding war like an auction. She only lent out the photos, she never sold them. As despicable as this was, it should have had nothing to do with my husband and me. When my brother became aware of his wife's business, instead of scolding her or protecting his daughter, he started gathering men to become customers, thinking more staff meant more revenue. To force me into working, he continued to threaten me by taking photos of the scene. They carefully chose a day when the neighbors wouldn't be around, locked Emily and me in their house, exchanged the spare key for a large sum of money, and went out of town for an overnight trip to prove their innocence. However, they didn't expect Emily, who had always obeyed my sister-in-law without question, to regret telling me about the monsters to protect me. While Emily didn't understand most of what was happening, she knew the monsters were targeting me. That night, when I learned about Emily's predicament, I asked my husband to capture images of these so-called monsters. With leaked information, police acted promptly when we reported it. We also informed Child Protective Services, ensuring Emily's protection. My brother and his wife were arrested on serious charges, including child welfare law violations and violations of laws preventing child exploitation. Despite being first-time offenders, they couldn't avoid imprisonment due to the highly malicious nature of the photos taken over several years. Fortunately, my sister-in-law hadn't digitized or sold Emily's photos, preventing any leakage. The revelation left me shocked, wondering how my once kind and reliable brother could become such a terrible person. We had been helping each other out as usual until then, and the fact that I didn't notice this distortion scares me. Anyway, I want them to face what they've done. Following the arrest of my brother and his wife, the so-called monsters were also brought in for questioning by the police. They argued their innocence, claiming that because their plans had not been successful, they weren't guilty. However, the discovery of someone else's child's photographs at their residence and their involvement in other criminal acts confessed by my brother and his wife during their interrogations led to their arrest on multiple charges. After dealing with the monsters lurking in our lives, we went to Child Protective Services to inquire about Emily's situation. Her parents were arrested, leaving her without anyone to care for her. In fact, they were unfit to be guardians in the first place, so custody of Emily was taken away from my brother and his wife. Neither my brother nor I have any living parents, and my sister-in-law's family is completely estranged. We learned that if no one from her family agreed to take her in, Emily would be placed with foster parents. After discussing it with my husband, we decided to adopt Emily. To me, Emily is not only someone I'm greatly indebted to, but also a girl I've grown to love as my own daughter. Leaving her was simply unbearable, and luckily my husband agreed. We saw this as an opportunity to move to my in-laws' town. Our daughter, who loves her grandparents and has always wanted an older sister, is overjoyed. She's eagerly looking forward to the weekends when she can see her grandparents more often, and now her wish of having Emily, whom she adores as her big sister, has come true. As for Emily, who finally got out of the clutches of her abusive parents, she's adapting incredibly well to her new environment, and as an older sister, she's beginning to lead a happy and peaceful life.
How much did you inherit? Simon's question came out of nowhere, catching me off guard on the night of my father's funeral. I was still reeling from my grief when he asked, "I heard your father had an inheritance of $3 million. So once again, how much did you get?" The inquiry gave me an unsettling feeling. Distraught and desperate to avoid further tension, I lied. Nothing. I didn't inherit anything. It seems my sister and mother are the ones who received it. Simon's face lit up with a triumphant grin. I knew it. Your parents always said you were incompetent and that they didn't care about you. I'm glad my instincts were right. What? I could barely process his words. I want a divorce, he declared coldly. I can't be with someone who's poor now. I've already found someone else. I need you out of my life. With that, Simon had me sign the divorce papers. His family mocked me for my misery, but they were mistaken. They could never understand how relieved I felt to be rid of Simon's betrayal. My name is Jane. I come from a family of 4 with a younger sister named Kim. From a young age, Kim and I never got along. My mother, Anne, always sided with Kim, leaving me feeling isolated, though I eventually became accustomed to it. My father, Dan, was the only one who seemed to care, but his demanding job kept him away from home, leaving me alone with my feelings of abandonment. Even as an adult, my situation remained unchanged. I wasn't allowed to attend college due to tuition fees. Yet, when Kim was set to enroll in a private college, my mother insisted that it would be a waste not to send her despite my own lack of educational opportunities. Jane, you're not sharp or smart like Kim. It's only right that you support her education and contribute to the household. It's what any responsible older sister would do, my mother said, as if it were common sense. Her words stung deeply, and tears streamed down my face. Kim looked at me with disdain, adding, "It's your own fault, you're incompetent. You're uglier and less successful than me, so you should try harder. If you can't do that, you're worthless." The toxicity of my family environment drove me to leave home once I started working. Living alone wasn't difficult for me, it felt liberating. Initially, my father sent me a small amount of money to help out, but after 6 months, that stopped. Instead, I received a letter from my mother accusing me of theft. "Your father was sending you money without our permission. You have no right to it because you haven't contributed to Kim's tuition or supported us. I'll be sending you an invoice for the total amount you received. Make sure to refund it. Stop being a thief." My mother's resentment was clear, and she sent an invoice calculated to cover the exact amount of alimony, demanding repayment for the money I had received from my father. I was deeply uncomfortable discussing or debating the matter any further, so I complied with my mother's demands, sent the money, and quietly moved to a new apartment. A few years later, I married Simon, whom I met at work. Determined to sever ties with my past, I decided to inform my parents about my marriage. When I returned to their house, I was struck by how much my father had aged. The once industrious man now looked frail and bent, struggling even to stand. "Oh, you're back," my mother remarked with disdain. "I wonder what this ungrateful daughter, who never sends any money home, wants." When I asked about my father's condition, my mother sneered. "He injured his back about a year ago and can't work anymore. Now he just stays at home and gets in my way. He's as useless as you are, Jane." Simon was taken aback by my mother's harsh words, but his attention quickly shifted when he saw my sister Kim. "Wow, you're Jane's sister. You're stunning. I can hardly believe you two are related." Kim, who had grown more self-centered since starting college, now sported flashy clothes and a vibrant hair color that seemed inappropriate for her age. Despite being old enough to have graduated, she still seemed like a student, which reflected her lack of seriousness about her studies. "This guy is your husband, Jane," Kim said, eyeing Simon with feigned sweetness. "He's quite handsome and seems way too good for you. I almost feel sorry for him." Kim deliberately flirted with Simon, her touches and compliments clearly meant to show off. It pained me to see Simon so delighted by Kim's attention, but I resolved to stay focused on my plans. I was marrying Simon, and that was final. "I'm going to cut ties with all of you," I declared. "Well, if you're going to do that, could you at least wait until I've finished taking care of your father?" My mother replied, barely looking up from her snacks. "I need to look after him. But honestly, I don't want to, and I definitely don't want Kim to deal with it either. It's her college life, after all. It would be a shame to distract her with such a bothersome task. You should be responsible for taking care of your father, Jane. Both of you are incompetent, so you'll get along just fine." Her words infuriated me, but I knew I couldn't ignore my father's needs. From that day forward, I began visiting my parents' house frequently to care for him. As I took on this responsibility, I discovered that neither my mother nor Kim worked. Kim didn't have a part-time job, and my mother had been a stay-at-home since my father's collapse. Yet they frequently dined out and shopped extravagantly. To my shock, they had even taken my father's bank book without his permission, spending his savings as if it were their own. My father was aware of their actions but chose to remain silent. "Dad, they'll keep doing this unless we do something about it. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "If I had, they would never admit they were wrong or apologize," he said. "I didn't want to burden you further." Despite everything, my father had always worked tirelessly for the family and was the only one who truly cared for me. I wanted to help him in any way I could. Just as I was contemplating how to address the situation, I received a call from the hospital where my father had been admitted after his collapse. I rushed to my parents' house before heading to the hospital. My mother and sister were lounging on the couch, absorbed in the TV, showing no sign of worry when the hospital called me. "Father collapsed, didn't he?" I asked, exasperated. "Oh, it's an exaggeration to say he collapsed," my mother replied dismissively. "He just fell in the hallway and hit his head. The ambulance took him to the hospital. I'll leave the rest to you." But we need to go to the hospital. I'm worried about father, I insisted. Shut up, she snapped. If he doesn't make it, the insurance will cover it. Why are you getting so emotional? My mother's coldness and her indifference made me sick. I left them behind and rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, I found my father lying in bed, hooked up to various tubes and barely conscious. As his condition worsened, he managed to notice me and murmured faintly, "I'm sorry for being so sudden. I must be being punished. I wasn't a good father because I couldn't protect you from our family." With those final words, my father closed his eyes. "I don't care about that, Dad. I love you. Please get well soon," I pleaded, holding his hand tightly, but he never responded. A week later, a lawyer contacted me regarding my father's will. He informed me that I was named as the beneficiary of an inheritance. According to the will, I was to inherit $3 million. I was stunned. It turned out that my father had hidden another bank book, separate from the one my mother had taken, which held the $3 million. He had also left a note specifying that this information should not be shared with any other family members. It seemed that this was his way of ensuring my future even after he was gone. Overwhelmed by my father's unexpected kindness, I made my way back to my parents' house to retrieve the hidden bank book. As I arrived, my mother and sister were waiting at the front door, their stances commanding and imperious. "What are you doing here now?" my mother demanded. "Came to scavenge things now that Dan's dead? How despicable. Everything here, the house, the car, belongs to me and Kim. Don't act like a thief." I knew better than to discuss my inheritance with them, especially given their unwillingness to listen. "I'm here to collect father's memorabilia, and shouldn't I be entitled to at least a small share of the inheritance?" Without missing a beat, my mother produced a document and waved it in front of me. It was another will, supposedly written by my father, but the handwriting was unmistakably Kim's, not my father's distinctive script. The will claimed that my mother and sister would inherit all of my father's estate. "I can't make out much of this since Kim's handwriting is so poor," I said, struggling to understand the document. "That doesn't matter," my mother replied coldly. "This is the will, and it's already been shared with all our relatives and neighbors. It's too late for you to contest it now." My mother refused to let me enter the house, fully aware that I knew the will was a forgery. Defeated, I left and returned home. Simon was waiting for me, concern etched on his face. "Were you at your parents' house? If you told me, I would have gone with you. It's a shame I missed seeing Kim." I was taken aback. "Why are you so interested, and what does any of this have to do with you, Simon?" "I went to retrieve my father's inheritance, but my mother and sister kicked me out of the house." "How much did you all inherit from your father?" Simon asked me, curiosity piqued. "I'm not sure of the total amount, but the house, land, and everything else were in his name." "So it must be quite substantial," I replied. "I see," Simon said, pressing further. "And how much of the inheritance do you get, Jane?" I hesitated, knowing I shouldn't reveal the truth. My instincts told me there was no inheritance for me. Everything was going to be divided between my mother and sister. Simon's face darkened as he suddenly retrieved the divorce papers from his room and thrust them in front of me. "I knew it. I knew you wouldn't inherit anything. You're just a burden, and I've been talking to Kim a lot lately. Honestly, you're just in my way. I want a divorce now, since there's nothing in it for me if we stay together." Simon had already signed his portion of the divorce papers, so I signed them immediately. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction as I watched Simon leave with the papers, eager to file them at the city office. This was likely the last time I'd see him smile so broadly, and the same went for my mother and sister. It felt like justice was finally catching up with those who had tormented my father and me for years. Later that day, I consulted with a lawyer who had handled my father's will and asked him to accompany me to my parents' house. When I presented the real will to my mother and sister, their usual calm demeanor turned to shock and disbelief as they read the document over and over. "This is a lie," my mother protested. "I have a will here that states Kim and I are the sole heirs. If you claim the other will is a forgery," the lawyer said, "we can conduct a handwriting analysis. If it's proven to be a fake, you could be charged with fraud. Are you prepared to face that?" My mother was left speechless, unable to respond. I also learned a great deal from Dan. He revealed that even after his health declined, my mother and sister had abandoned him, sold all his possessions without permission, and acted as they pleased. Kim, on the other hand, had been indulging in reckless behavior, gambling and spending excessively from his personal bank account, leaving him deeply in debt. Due to these malicious actions, both of them were stripped of any inheritance rights. The lawyer made it clear that if my mother and sister continued to unjustly interfere with my inheritance, we would file a lawsuit against them. As the lawyer finished speaking, my mother and sister were left in a state of utter despair. I decided it was time to collect my father's hidden bank book and leave my parents' house for good. With that, I finally felt completely free from the burdens of my family. Soon after, Simon, unaware of the truth, apparently approached my sister, hoping to start a relationship with her. My mother and sister, keeping the inheritance issue a secret, married him quickly. Their aim was to secure a steady source of income and make him their personal ATM. Simon, deceived and eager to enjoy his newfound wealth, bought several luxury cars and quit his job, relying on what he thought was their inheritance. Eventually, Simon noticed something was off and reached out to me in a panic. "Jane, I was wrong. You're all I have. I want to start over." I replied simply, "I don't need you anymore. Besides, you have Kim now. You should take care of your wife properly," and gently ended the call. Moments before Simon called, I had received a call from Kim. "You've ruined my life." Simon quit his job and splurged like a fool as soon as we got married. "I can't believe a man who only cares about money is now my husband. My family name is tarnished because of him. What are you going to do about it?" I responded calmly, "Kim, you're just as interested in money as Simon is. You two are a perfect match. Besides, I heard you and Simon were getting along well while we were still married. Be happy your love came true. I'll be filing a claim for compensation for the affair, though. From now on, let's only communicate through our lawyers. I never want to hear from you again." "Hey, I'm your sister. Aren't you going to treat me like family?" Kim protested. I laughed at her words. "You're the one who never treated me like family." With that, I hung up, blocked her number, and never heard from her again. I was finally free. I used my father's inheritance to build a new house and settled into it. I found a fulfilling job as an office clerk and embraced a busy but satisfying life on my own. Occasionally, I felt a pang of loneliness, but I knew my father was watching over me. As I looked at his picture on my wall, I felt his gentle smile and knew he was proud.
My husband suddenly starts ranting about how he refuses to be the breadwinner for a housewife, spouting things that make no sense. Before I know it, he's packing up my belongings. "What are you doing?" I ask, bewildered. "I'm asking you to leave this house until you realize what you've done," he replies coldly. "What?" I can barely process his words. My name is Mary, a 27-year-old office worker. I recently landed my dream job at a cosmetics company and threw myself into my work with enthusiasm. My dedication paid off. I received excellent feedback from my boss and earned a promotion. For someone my age, my salary is pretty impressive. I've been married to my husband Tom for a year. We're the same age, but he earns less than I do. It doesn't bother me, but I've come to realize that it's a sensitive issue for him. Tom never brings it up directly, but whenever our conversations drift towards work, he quickly changes the subject. I think it reminds him that his salary is lower than mine. He often seems unmotivated about his job, saying, "I don't have a great job, so I've learned to avoid talking about my work too much at home." Despite this, Tom does his share of the housework and is great at cooking and cleaning. He has a gentle nature and we communicate well, so I've always felt that we're a strong couple. But now I'm beginning to wonder if I was the only one who felt that way. One day, I wasn't feeling well and experienced severe nausea. Concerned, I went to the hospital and found out I was pregnant. Excited, I immediately shared the news with my husband. He was overjoyed, and seeing his happiness made me even more thrilled. I thought to myself, we're going to build a loving, warm family. Decided to take maternity leave about 6 weeks before my due date, wanting to give myself time to rest since it was my first pregnancy. However, around that time, I noticed a subtle change in my husband's attitude. When he came home one evening, I greeted him with a smile. "Welcome home." He looked at me lagging on the sofa and remarked, relaxing on the sofa again, "Huh? You've got it easy." His tone surprised me. At first, I brushed it off, assuming he was just stressed from work. But as the days passed, his attitude toward me grew colder and more distant. "Hey, where's my dinner? Sorry, I'm not feeling well today, so I picked up some pre-made food from the supermarket." "What? You've got to be kidding me. After a long day at work, you're serving me supermarket pre-made food." His sudden outburst caught me off guard, and I was too exhausted to argue. Some days I felt so sick that I could barely do anything. Even the smell of food made me nauseous. On one of those days, I sent my husband a message explaining how I was feeling and asked if he could either cook for himself or grab something to eat. He didn't respond, but I saw that he'd read the message, so I assumed everything was fine. I crawled into bed and fell asleep for a few hours. When I woke up, it was midnight. I got up to go to the bathroom and noticed the light was on in the living room, with voices drifting from inside. Curious, I walked in and was surprised to find that my husband had brought some of his colleagues home with him. "Oh, look, the selfish princess has finally woken up," one of his colleagues said with a smirk. Another added, "Sorry to disturb you." I greeted them politely, but I was shocked. I quickly pulled my husband aside into the hallway. "What's going on? Why would you bring people over this late?" He shrugged. "What's the big deal? We went out for drinks, and when that wasn't enough, I invited them back here. You know I'm pregnant, right?" I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "So what? I'm not asking you to do anything risky. But could you please consider the impact this is having on my mental health?" "What? You're overreacting. If you had cooked dinner, I wouldn't have needed to go out for drinks with them. So you're the one responsible for me bringing them home." His reasoning made no sense to me. If you have so much energy, why don't you make something to eat and serve it to everyone? "I can't, I'm still feeling sick." "You're just being selfish. You're ruining the fun for everyone. Go back to your bedroom and get some rest." With that, he turned and went back into the living room. I couldn't take it anymore. Frustrated, I decided to move back to my parents' house. I explained the situation to my obstetrician and asked if I could give birth near them. Fortunately, she knew an obstetrician close to my parents' place and promptly provided me with a letter of introduction. I left a note on the table saying, "I'm going home for a while to give birth." My husband immediately started calling and messaging, but I chose to ignore him. About a week later, I received a message from him saying, "I'm sorry. You can stay at your parents' house and rest before the birth." Although I still hadn't forgiven him, I was relieved to hear his apology. I stayed at my parents' house and it made a huge difference. I felt much better. My nausea subsided and my appetite returned. After that, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. My parents were thrilled to welcome their granddaughter, and my husband came to the hospital as well. He was overjoyed to hold our daughter, exclaiming, "She's so cute," and showed genuine concern for my health. I felt relieved, thinking that he had returned to his caring and gentle self. Once I recovered, I spent about 2 weeks at my parents' house before moving back to the home I shared with my husband. When I returned, he eagerly took on the task of feeding our daughter after work. Initially, he was very involved, helping with diaper changes and bath times. His enthusiasm and support were incredibly encouraging. I felt relieved, believing that my husband and I would be able to live together harmoniously once more. However, about 2 months after our daughter was born, his attitude began to shift again. It seemed to be related to our baby's increased nighttime crying. Until then, she had been sleeping soundly, but now her cries were frequent and disruptive, waking us up regularly throughout the night. The lack of sleep began to take a toll on my husband, who became increasingly stressed and less supportive with childcare. He even said, "I'll sleep on the couch," and left me to handle everything on my own. Additionally, he started coming home late from work, which only deepened my mistrust and concern about our relationship. Once I saw him acting this way, I began to notice many other things about him. I started expressing my frustration about his lack of involvement in raising our child. My husband appeared increasingly stressed, and one day he made a startling comment. "Who do you think is providing for you?" "What?" I asked, confused. It's because of me that you're able to stay home and live comfortably. You should show more respect for your husband. I was taken aback. I appreciate that you were supportive in the beginning. But lately, when our daughter cries, you just brush it off and say, "Hey, she's crying," without offering any help. No, that's not what I'm talking about, he snapped. What do you mean by silly? I asked, puzzled. I'm the boss in this house and you're showing me disrespect. I don't understand what you're referring to, I said, genuinely confused. I'm the one who earns the money, so you need to show me more respect. He then began to say things that didn't make sense, like I'm not going to be the breadwinner for a housewife. Without warning, he started packing up my belongings. What are you doing? I asked, bewildered. I'm asking you to leave this house until you regret what you've done, he said as he hastily stuffed my clothes into a bag and tried to force me out. Fine, I'll go. Just let me pack my things myself, I responded, starting to fold my clothes and place them in my bag. Once I was done packing, I picked up my daughter and saw him throw my box out the front door. Come back when you've had time to reflect on your actions, he said, and then he locked the front door behind him. Left with no other option, I returned to my parents' house. After leaving my daughter in my mother's care, I went to the city office to pick up the divorce papers. The next day, I went back to my husband's house and rang the doorbell. Oh, you're back already? I suppose you've realized you can't manage without me. All I need is for you to show me you're sorry. If you get down on your knees, I might forgive you, my husband said with a smirk. Ignoring his demands, I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and handed them to him. What? Divorce papers? Why? I thought you were sorry, he exclaimed, confused. After everything you've said and done, I have nothing to apologize for. I haven't done anything wrong. I can't stay married to you any longer, I replied firmly. My husband was clearly taken aback, not expecting me to follow through with the divorce. He then said something that made little sense. But you're okay with this. It's going to be tough for you as a single mother. You don't even have a job. How will you support your daughter? What are you talking about? I didn't lose my job, I replied. What? You've been home all this time. I thought you quit because you got pregnant. Oh, so that's what you've assumed. Who said I quit my job? I'm just on maternity and childcare leave. What? It seemed my husband believed that women automatically quit their jobs after giving birth. Oh no, I thought you had become a stay-at-home wife, he said, realizing his misunderstanding. Oh, I see. So you thought you could one-up me, I said. My husband's face went pale with shock. It was clear he was deeply hurt. He had always been proud, and when we were both working, my higher income seemed to bother him. I guess he just assumed I had quit my job rather than being on leave. I was thoroughly disgusted by his behavior. Husbands and wives should be equal, I told him. I'm exhausted from dealing with your inferiority complex. I never cared about who made more money. Realizing the gravity of his actions, my husband broke down in tears and pleaded, I'm sorry. Please don't divorce me. But by then it was too late. I asked him to sign the divorce papers and left the house. We later finalized the divorce through our lawyers. I had recorded my ex-husband's verbal abuse as a precaution, so I was able to use it as evidence to secure alimony for the harassment I endured. Without my income, he couldn't afford the rent on our apartment, so he had to move to a cheaper place. Interestingly, when he brought his colleagues over that night, they had no idea I was pregnant. When they saw my belly, they were all taken aback. After our divorce, rumors spread at his workplace that he'd been dumped by his wife. My ex-husband must be feeling a lot of shame now, and he totally deserves it. Meanwhile, I took maternity leave and returned to work, now living at my parents' house. They've been incredibly supportive as I balance work and raising my child. Although my marriage didn't work out, I'm happier than ever thanks to the fulfilling work I love and the joy on my daughter's face. I'm committed to my career and excited to watch my daughter grow up. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. I was caught off guard when I found out you weren't staying with us. I didn't make a reservation for you, and my mind went blank with frustration. We're on a family vacation that I never even wanted to go on in the first place, and now we're at a fancy hotel. My husband pretends not to notice the tension and walks away. "We'll see you at checkout, Emily," he says as he heads into the luxurious hotel with everyone else, leaving me behind. My name is Emily, and I just turned 30 this year. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my husband, Spencer, my mother-in-law, Kate, and our son, Sean, who is now 3. Spencer and I met on a blind date 7 years ago, and married shortly after. Our life together has been ordinary and free of major conflicts, and we're known among the neighbors as a loving couple. 2 years after we married, we had Sean. Spencer was busy with work but was always actively involved in childcare. I had no complaints about him, and life was manageable. However, things began to change after Sean was born. 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, and Kate was set to move in with us. The last time I saw her, other than at our wedding, was when Spencer and I visited her to announce our engagement. It had been quite some time, and my first impression of her hadn't been positive. My father-in-law, on the other hand, was always kind to me and left me with a good impression. I remember his concerns about whether I was the right choice for Spencer and his worries that I might cause him trouble. His bluntness about these concerns stung, and although Spencer worked hard to win her approval, Kate's disapproving looks were hard to ignore. We eventually managed to get her approval with some persuasion, but I still resent how openly critical she was in front of me. When Kate and her belongings finally arrived at our house, I was determined to stay positive and do my best to get along with her. I helped her unpack and was relieved to see she was kind to Sean. Spencer and I divided the tasks. He handled the heavy items while I took care of the smaller things. Unpacking went smoothly, until a minor issue arose. "This is supposed to go over here," Kate commented, referring to a fake plant I had placed to brighten up the room. Although I was annoyed by her criticism, I moved the plant to where she wanted it. She then spent some time watching TV and didn't offer any help with the unpacking. I was busy managing Sean and finishing up the packing, but couldn't ask Spencer, who was resting after handling the heavy lifting, for help. I ended up finishing the task with mixed emotions, feeling the strain of trying to keep the peace. Tried to convince myself that Kate was just struggling with the change in her living situation and pushed aside my frustration towards her. However, her criticism persisted daily. One morning, after waking up early to prepare breakfast for everyone, I attempted to take a break. But Kate's voice cut through the quiet. "If you have time to rest, you should be cleaning up the house." She never gave me a moment's peace, constantly criticizing how I did things. Meanwhile, she was rarely home during the day and never seemed to lift a finger herself. The constant strain was wearing me down, so I decided to talk to Spencer about her behavior. "She must be having a hard time adjusting," I said, hoping for some support. But despite knowing how she treated me, Spencer didn't intervene. I would lay in bed each night, my hands on my forehead, overwhelmed and unable to sleep. No matter how I felt, my 3-year-old son would cry at night from the exhaustion. I struggled to get out of bed to comfort him, and Kate, disturbed by the noise, would shake me awake, scolding me for not attending to him sooner. "How can you still be sleeping when your son is crying? It's your job to take care of him," she would yell, berating me for my fatigue and inability to keep up. I didn't want to escalate things, so I quietly got up, but the stress left me with no sleep that night. When Spencer was off work the next day, I planned to cook lunch. Kate, however, had already started preparing the meal. When she placed the food on the table, one plate was noticeably missing. "Looks like one plate is missing," Kate said. "I made it for Spencer, who works hard, and for my grandson. There's none for you. Make your own." I was stunned and hurt. It became glaringly clear that Kate's behavior was more than just criticism. It was deliberate mistreatment. I had been trying to ignore it for a while, but it was impossible to overlook any longer. I struggled to tolerate Kate's behavior, trying to convince myself that she was just being tough on me to make me a better wife. If I didn't keep thinking this way, I would have crumbled under the pressure. Unable to voice my frustrations to Kate directly, I confided in a friend after dropping Scene off at daycare. "That's definitely bullying. How are you holding up?" she asked, genuinely concerned. I detailed everything to my childhood best friend, who listened with empathy. Her concern and support overwhelmed me, and I finally broke down in tears. I had been battling my frustrations alone for too long. She reassured me that I was doing my best and that things would get better. "I'll help you. We'll figure something out," she promised. Although our conversation was brief because we both had commitments, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. My friend suggested a couple of things. One idea was to use a recording device to capture what was being said in the house. On my way to pick up Scene, I bought a cheap recorder. When I got home, I found Kate out as usual and took the opportunity to set up the recorder discreetly. While cleaning, I noticed a piece of paper that had fallen from a drawer in Kate's room. When I picked it up and unfolded it, I discovered it was a personal loan agreement for $20,000. I could hardly believe what I was seeing, but I decided it might be useful and tucked the paper into my pocket. After a while, Kate returned, and soon Spencer came home just in time for dinner. As we sat around the table, Kate began her usual complaints. Then out of the blue she mentioned, "By the way, my friend gave me a discount coupon for a one-night stay at a 5-star spa hotel." Her mention of the coupon seemed like a hint that she wanted to go. Spencer was enthusiastic about the idea, and even Scene seemed excited. I, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled and braced myself for what I anticipated would be an unpleasant experience. "Well, since you're here and you work so hard, you might as well join us," Kate said. I was taken aback. Hearing such an offer from someone who had been so critical of me was astonishing. Part of me wondered if she meant well, though I struggled to believe her offer wasn't made with some ulterior motive. She wanted to book everything for the next day. That night, I couldn't sleep, trying to decide what to do. By morning, I was still conflicted. I sat for a long time, pondering the trip. Scene wanted to go, but since Mom wouldn't be able to watch him, and it would be difficult to take him with me alone. Needed Spencer's help. "You don't support me when your mother mistreats me." "I don't want to go," I said. Spencer was at a loss for words. He knew I was right and was caught between wanting to please his mother and addressing my concerns. He pleaded with me to reconsider, so I decided to set a condition. "Fine, but first, take a look at this," I said, showing him the loan agreement I had found in Kate's room. Spencer's face went pale as he read the document, revealing Kate's $20,000 debt. He was shocked and couldn't believe his mother was in such financial trouble. "Can we help her pay this off? As her son, I can't just ignore it," he asked, knowing that I was responsible for managing our finances. "Of course," I replied, understanding the complexity of the situation. I declined Kate's offer. I had no intention of helping someone who had treated me poorly. I understood Spencer's feelings as a son, but I couldn't agree to support Kate under those circumstances. I told Spencer, "I will help you with this trip, but only if you agree to my conditions." The first condition was that Spencer must intervene whenever Kate mistreated or overly criticized me. The second was that I would establish some ground rules for Kate, write them down, and post them around the house. If Kate couldn't agree to these conditions, we would have to ask her to leave. Spencer agreed to these terms, and we decided to implement them after the trip. I asked my friend to post the rules while we were away. We would continue to act normally until the trip was over, and then we'd put our plan into action. Spencer agreed, and I decided to go on the trip with them. The next day, I informed Kate that I would be joining them. I kept reminding myself to be patient just a little longer. On the day of the trip, Spencer handled everyone's bags as we prepared to leave the house. Kate's bullying began immediately. "You don't need to carry the bags. Let Emily do it," she said. Spencer glanced at me apologetically, and I complied, believing it was better to avoid conflict. However, the bags were extremely heavy, and managing them while taking care of Scene left me exhausted. The journey involved taking an Amtrak train followed by a drive over a mountain road to the hotel. The exterior and interior of the hotel were stunningly luxurious. Scene was thrilled, exploring every corner, while Kate admired the decor and checked us in at the front desk. As I grabbed my bag and prepared to head to our room, Kate's next words took me by surprise. "Were you planning to stay with us? I only made a reservation for the three of us." I was stunned and speechless. It became clear that Kate had invited me on this trip solely to serve as a porter and never intended for me to stay. Gradually, the reality of the situation sunk in. I asked Kate, "Then where should I sleep?" Her response was dismissive. "I don't know and I don't care. Why don't you just camp out in the woods?" I was taken aback. She had invited me on this trip only to suggest that I sleep outside. I was seething with anger, and I almost shouted at her, but she and my family had already disappeared down the hallway. "I'll see you at checkout time," Kate called back over her shoulder. Left standing alone in the lobby, I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. I had suspected there was a catch, but being forced to camp out was beyond what I had imagined. Tears welled up in my eyes as I made my way out of the hotel. Spencer sent a brief message saying, "I'm sorry." I was too hurt and angry to respond. After noon, I found a cafe for lunch and later stumbled upon an open field where I could see the sunset. Just as I settled in, my friend called, "Hey, how's the trip going?" "But you asked." I had given her a duplicate key and informed her of the situation beforehand. She was furious and offered to come pick me up, but I declined. I appreciated her offer, but I knew leaving now would mean Kate getting exactly what she wanted. Unsure of what Kate might do next, I decided to consult a lawyer. I sent him the evidence of the mistreatment, preparing to pursue a case for emotional abuse. If it turned out that Kate's actions were premeditated, she would be asked to leave after the trip. I couldn't find a legal claim, but I had solid evidence that should have supported my case. The lawyer assured me that I had grounds to proceed if I chose to. After the call, the mental and physical exhaustion hit me hard, and I collapsed onto the fresh grass. I spent the night in an open field with a stunning view and a cool breeze, feeling both the beauty and the weight of the situation. The next morning, I met up with Kate and my family just in time for checkout. "Emily, did you actually sleep in the woods? I bet you didn't even clean up. You're so filthy," Kate sneered. Spencer tried to intervene, but Kate quickly shifted the topic. It was clear he had mentioned that pushing me out was excessive. Kate gushed about how nice the hotel had been, but Scene's smile was my only comfort as we headed home. Once we arrived, Kate immediately began to yell, "What's all this? Don't mess with me." Rules were posted all over the house, and it was evident she had seen them as her face flushed with anger. When Spencer showed her the IO, her face went pale and her mouth fell open in shock. At first, she tried to deny everything, but when pressed, she confessed to squandering her husband's life insurance money and borrowing more once it ran out. Spencer and I proceeded with our plan. "I can't have someone with debt living with us," I said. "You need to leave. And since I have evidence of how you've mistreated me, I will be suing you." I played the recording for her. As she listened, her face turned ghostly white, and she begged me to let her stay. I told her she could remain if she adhered to the rules and refrained from aggressive behavior. She eagerly agreed and apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry. Please help me." I never thought I'd see her like this, I thought, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. When I thought the ordeal was finally over, my knees gave way, and I collapsed to the floor. Spencer quickly helped me into a chair and then began to confront Kate about her debts. It was clear that his respect and trust in her had shattered. Kate, who had never imagined facing such a fierce rebuke from her son, frantically apologized. Once everything was settled, she fell silent, staring blankly at the sky for the rest of the day. The atmosphere in our home changed dramatically the next morning. I woke up early as usual and started preparing breakfast. Kate, however, made a cutting remark right away. The difference was in Spencer's response. "Mom, we talked about this yesterday," he said firmly, causing Kate to fall silent and retreat to the sofa. I almost felt a pang of amusement at the sight, but I managed to stay focused on preparing breakfast. Spencer was grappling with guilt for not protecting me and struggling to stand up to his mother. Despite this, I knew he was a kind man, and there must have been reasons for his previous inaction. I couldn't bring myself to hate him for it. He tearfully apologized to me, and from then on, he supported me and kept a closer watch on Kate. Her attitude toward me improved daily. While she still made occasional comments, they lacked malice. I hoped this new dynamic would last. For the first time, I could breathe easily and maintain a healthy mindset. The debt repayment was set at $700 a month. Spencer and I worked together to manage it as Kate was too elderly to work. I took a part-time job to balance work and home life, and Kate took responsibility for taking Sean to and from daycare. She did a good job with this. Spencer took over managing the family finances, which helped improve our situation little by little. No matter how much you love your husband, dealing with a difficult mother-in-law can make you consider divorce. Although I couldn't bring myself to do that, I reflected on how much easier life could have been if I had acted sooner. Still, finding that Io was a turning point that helped me rebuild my family. I was grateful to my friend for her support and encouragement. Without her, I might have faced a mental breakdown. I deeply cherish our friendship. Looking back, I feel a sense of accomplishment for holding my family together through the tough times. Even when I was exhausted and unmotivated, I made sure to fulfill my responsibilities to ensure a decent life for everyone. Though I may never fully forgive Kate, I intend to treat her kindly as my mother-in-law. Years have passed and my son has started preschool. We are nearing the end of paying off the debt and considering a move to a new house. Kate has begun helping me more, and my relationship with Spencer has improved significantly. We're even contemplating having another child. Our family is stable now, and I'm content with our progress. I will continue to do my best for my family, always striving to support and nurture them. "I told you I don't like this food," I said, my frustration clear. "You're harassing me by making things I don't enjoy, aren't you?" I added, feeling overwhelmed. "But your husband likes it," she replied dismissively. "Just cook something else right now," I insisted, my patience wearing thin. I had reached my breaking point. The constant yelling and screaming from my mother-in-law when she didn't like something had become unbearable. I wasn't sure if I could handle her sarcasm and criticism for the rest of my life. I had resigned myself to enduring her bullying, but then something happened that changed everything. My name is Ellen. My husband George and I have been married for 3 years, and we were living with my parents at their house. George, often away on business trips, was currently gone, and though I used to feel uneasy without him, had become so busy that I barely noticed his absence. My days were packed from dawn until dusk. I would wake up early to prepare a meal for my father-in-law, who rose with the sun. While he ate, I would clean the house and do the laundry. After he finished, I'd immediately clean up the dishes. Once the household chores were done, I'd rush to my part-time job. When I got home at 5 p.m., I'd cook dinner again, clean the house, and do laundry one more time. By the end of the day, I was exhausted. But the most draining part of my life was the constant bullying from my mother-in-law. Although she didn't work and spent all her time at home, she did no housework. My husband once told me he couldn't even remember what his mother's cooking tasted like, indicating she hadn't done much housework when he was growing up. Despite her inactivity, my mother-in-law had a knack for criticizing everything I did. She was meticulous about the food I prepared and always found fault with the cleanliness of the house. It felt like her hobby to belittle me. Known in the neighborhood as a show-off, she would parade around in ill-fitting jewelry, and though the neighbors would compliment her, they didn't genuinely think she looked good. They were hesitant to upset her, perhaps out of respect for my father-in-law, who was well-liked and involved in the community. He had been an executive at a prominent local company and was still connected with many people from his professional life. Though my father-in-law never imposed his will, my mother-in-law's overbearing nature was often overlooked by the neighbors, who chose not to confront her. Feeling isolated, I had no one to turn to in the neighborhood. However, when my father-in-law fell ill and was diagnosed with advanced cancer, my world shifted. I was grateful for him, who was the complete opposite of my mother-in-law. Despite his illness, his kindness and genuine concern for me stood out starkly against the backdrop of my mother-in-law's cruelty. I knew that our financial stability was largely thanks to my father-in-law's past contributions. To show my gratitude, I tried to take care of him as best as I could. I made sure to keep him engaged with conversations, played cards with him, and prepared easy-to-eat meals to ensure he received the nutrition he needed. He was always appreciative and often expressed his thanks. "Thank you," he would say. "I'm so happy every day because of you." No, I would respond. "I'm just doing what I can." "I'm sorry for the burden my wife has put on you," he would continue. "She doesn't do much around the house." It was clear that my father-in-law was concerned about my mother-in-law's lack of effort. His gentle nature made it hard for him to address her shortcomings directly. Still, it was comforting to know he understood how poorly she treated me. "I'm sorry for leaving everything to you, Ellen," he said. "My wife should be doing a better job. You don't have to force yourself to take care of me." "Please don't say that," I reassured him. "I just want to repay you for everything you've done for me." His eyes welled up with tears as he held my hand and said, "Thank you." But then everything changed. My father-in-law's condition suddenly deteriorated, and he was rushed to the hospital in an emergency. When the ambulance arrived, he was already in a coma. The doctors informed us that his prognosis was uncertain and that we needed to prepare ourselves for the worst. The sudden turn of events left me in a state of panic, struggling to process the gravity of the situation. I couldn't stop crying when I saw my father-in-law, his face etched with pain. I felt a pang of sympathy for my mother-in-law, believing she must be deeply distressed. Asked her how she was coping. However, her response was chillingly unexpected. "I'm sure he'll never recover from this, but at least his inheritance will be enough," she said, her words cold and calculating. Her callousness enraged me. Meanwhile, my father-in-law remained unconscious, though his breathing was steady. I visited him daily, speaking to him as much as I could, hoping that somehow my words might reach him and prompt a response. Yet he showed no signs of waking. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, never came to see him. When I encouraged her to visit, she would respond dismissively. "Don't tell me what to do. I'm too busy every day. Spending time at the hospital is a waste." Whenever I tried to persuade her, she would lash out with harsh comments. She even had the audacity to instruct me, "Hey Ellen, you're bringing clean clothes for him every day, right? Just pretend I did it. Don't make the mistake of saying you did." Her intention was clear. She wanted to appear benevolent while avoiding any actual responsibility. "He'll never wake up, and his inheritance will be mine," she declared. "Don't talk nonsense to people about it." It was evident that my mother-in-law's sole concern was the inheritance, revealing just how little she cared about my father-in-law's well-being. I was so infuriated by my mother-in-law's selfishness that I decided I had to take action. With my father-in-law no longer at home, her bullying had intensified. "Why aren't you starting dinner yet? It's too early for that," she snapped. "I'm heading to the hospital now and will be back soon to cook." "You really piss me off, Ellen," she continued. "I've told you countless times that the old man is only good for leaving me his money. He doesn't need visits or sympathy." Her harsh words about my father-in-law were too much to bear. I wanted to retort but managed to keep my composure. Then I received a call from the hospital with the news I had been hoping for. "Is it true?" asked, heart racing. Thank God. My father-in-law had finally emerged from his coma, and remarkably, his condition had stabilized. I rushed to the hospital with my mother-in-law. As we entered his room, I greeted him warmly. "Welcome back. It's so good to see you." He responded, "Me too. I'm sorry for all the trouble." My father-in-law smiled peacefully at me. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, put on an act of joy and said, "Honey, I've been taking care of you every day." "I see," he replied, noting that his clothes were clean. "You did all this for me?" "Yes, I did everything," she said, looking at me expectantly, as if she wanted me to agree with her performance. Ignored her silent cues and let her leave. It was clear from her expression that she was frustrated with me for not playing along. My father-in-law noticed her irritation, but chose not to comment. "Well, I'm going to go now," my mother-in-law said, her mood sour. "I have some errands to run, so please take care of things here, Ellen." She cast one last annoyed glance at my father-in-law before leaving the room. "Are you okay, Ellen?" he asked, noticing the tension. "Why do you ask?" I responded, puzzled. "My wife's attitude seemed strange," he said. "I thought it was you who took care of me all this time." I realized that he had seen through the pretense. Had been keeping evidence of my mother-in-law's actions, planning to share it when the time was right. I hadn't expected to reveal it so soon. "Well, I'm sorry if this disturbs you," I said, pulling out my voice recorder. "But please listen to this." I played the recording for him, feeling a mix of guilt and relief as he heard my mother-in-law's true voice. I knew my father-in-law would find it painful to hear everything my mother-in-law had said on the recording. Her words were filled with malice and greed. "When my husband dies, I want all the inheritance for myself. I want him to die soon. I don't want to take care of him. It's a waste of time." As I looked at my father-in-law with concern, I was surprised to see him laughing. "She's turned into such a greedy woman, hasn't she?" he said with a chuckle. "I wouldn't give any of my inheritance to someone like that." Despite his laughter, I could sense his deep anger and hurt. A few days later, my father-in-law's condition stabilized, and he was discharged from the hospital. Once home, my mother-in-law made a point of telling him how difficult it had been to care for him every day. My father-in-law listened in silence, not disputing her complaints. Shortly after, my husband returned from his business trip to visit his father. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said as he arrived, "but it's good to see you're doing okay." "Yes, I'm fine," my father-in-law replied. "Thanks to you and Ellen for looking out for me. I'm really glad you're here." My father-in-law seemed genuinely grateful for our support. From then on, my husband and I continued to care for him. Although he made some progress, his health remained fragile. I could see my father-in-law growing weaker each day. The reality of his approaching farewell was becoming clear. My husband and I made a pact to do our utmost for him until we had to say goodbye. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law remained unchanged. She continued to neglect my father-in-law's care, spending her time away from home. It seemed she believed that with my husband's return, she could relax and let us handle everything. The fact that both my father-in-law and husband were home made it harder for her to assert her dominance over me. As my father-in-law's condition deteriorated, he ate less and less. In his final moments, he managed to whisper his last words to us. "Thank you both so much. I've left a will for you to read after I'm gone. I appreciate your care until the end." With those words, his life came to an end. At his funeral, I was deeply moved by the sheer number of people who came to pay their respects. It was clear that my father-in-law had been greatly respected at work and cherished by many. In contrast, my mother-in-law seemed unnervingly lively. She acted as though she was the one who had brought everyone together, and even boasted about taking care of him until the very end. Her lack of tears and her disingenuous display of grief were unsettling. I wanted to confront her about her behavior in front of the attendees, but I refrained from causing a scene at my father-in-law's grave. The funeral went smoothly, and I was relieved that my father-in-law could rest in peace. However, when we returned home, I noticed a drastic shift in my mother-in-law's attitude. My mother-in-law's attitude changed drastically after the funeral. She was visibly exhausted and spoke with a mix of relief and satisfaction. "I'm so tired. Funerals are always so depressing," she said. "But now that I have the inheritance, I can look forward to the rest of my life." It was clear she believed that all of my father-in-law's inheritance was rightfully hers. She seemed in high spirits, making plans for her newfound wealth. That's when my husband presented her with the will. "I'm sorry to change the mood," he said, "but Dad left this will before he passed. I haven't read it yet, but I think it has something to do with the inheritance." "Don't need to see the will. It's all mine," she replied confidently. "Let's just sit down and read it," my husband suggested, trying to calm the situation. When my husband carefully opened the will, my mother-in-law grabbed the paper roughly and began to read. Her expression shifted from confidence to shock as she read the contents. "What? What is this?" she stammered, her face going pale. I took the will from her trembling hands and read it myself. It stated that I was to inherit everything my father-in-law had. It also mentioned that the inheritance was to be used by both me and George as a couple, acknowledging my care for him while my husband was away. This made perfect sense. My father-in-law's gratitude was evident in his will. "But all of it," my mother-in-law protested, her voice rising in outrage. "This isn't right. How can two strangers get everything?" She accused me of forging the will and made vicious remarks, calling me names and claiming that I must have manipulated my father-in-law. "Hey Mom, stop," my husband finally said, his anger rising. "You've never taken care of Dad. Ellen did. That's why he was so grateful to her." My mother-in-law, now hysterical, began to cry uncontrollably. "Please, please, at least leave me the house." I felt a pang of sympathy for my mother-in-law, knowing how hard it must be to lose the home she had lived in for so long. To ease her distress, I decided to offer her a small portion of my inheritance. "You can keep the house," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. "I understand you're struggling financially, so I'll give you some money as well. But please, don't act like you did before. We're moving out, and you'll need to manage on your own." Her reaction shifted dramatically once she learned she would be receiving both the house and some money. "Oh, thank God. I was afraid I'd lose the house too," she exclaimed, her mood lightening. "If you're leaving, then get out already." With that, she returned to her old, unpleasant self. I was frustrated by how easily I had been manipulated by her false tears, but the thought of no longer living with her outweighed my irritation over the portion of the inheritance I was giving away. A week later, we began our move. We planned to temporarily live in an apartment while searching for a suitable location to build a new house. Thanks to the inheritance from my father-in-law, we would be able to construct a beautiful home. I also wanted to build a small altar in his honor to show my gratitude. I was thrilled at the prospect of a new chapter free from the constant scrutiny of my mother-in-law. On the other hand, she struggled to adjust to her new circumstances. Despite losing her primary residence, she continued her lavish spending habits, living beyond her means. As word of our departure spread, the neighborhood's attitude toward my mother-in-law shifted. The neighbors, once wary of her, began spreading rumors, further isolating her. Her extravagant lifestyle eventually depleted her savings and pension. She had to sell the house she had fought so hard to keep, and now, with no home or job, her current situation is unknown to me. As far as I'm concerned, she is no longer my concern. I have no interest in where she goes or what she does from now on.
Oh, did I forget to mention that I changed the reservation time? You didn't show up, so I boarded the train without you. I could hear a woman's laughter in the background, sitting next to my husband, Harry, on the other end of the phone. How could you do that? Come back right now, I demanded, my voice trembling with disbelief. It's your fault for being so lazy that you got left behind, he replied casually. You can deal with the rest on your own. Besides, I canceled your ticket. It was too expensive to waste. That's not what I meant, I tried to explain, but he cut me off. We're going through a tunnel now, so I'm hanging up. You should just give up and head home. Without any hesitation, Harry ended the call. No, this isn't what I meant at all. If things keep going like this, we're headed for disaster. I've been married to Harry for 5 years. We tied the knot after our son Tom was born, and now Tom is 6. In the beginning, the 3 of us were happy together, but over time, Harry grew distant. He stopped paying attention to Tom, despite his earlier promises to protect us. I'll take care of you and Tom, Harry had once vowed, but now I wonder if those words were just a way to manipulate me. Harry claims he's too busy with work, ignoring our son completely. When I urge him to be more involved, he dismisses me entirely. Recently, his words have turned cold and cruel. The other day, he even mentioned divorce in front of Tom. I'm busy with work. You're just a housewife, right? My house, my rules. If you don't like it, why don't you just divorce me? I'll agree to it any time. After all, for a woman like you, a divorce will be the end. You can't survive without my money, so don't even think about talking back to me. I wanted to argue, but as a housewife, I felt powerless. If I fought back, it could really lead to a divorce. I've thought about leaving Harry many times before, but the idea of our son's future always held me back. No matter how much society claims to be more accepting of single parents, the reality is often different. They're still judged and looked down upon. What's the right thing to do? These thoughts weighed on me every day, leaving me physically and mentally exhausted. One day, as I returned home after dropping Tom off at daycare, I ran into my neighbor, Sarah. Are you okay, Janet? You don't look well. Is your son in kindergarten? I can't believe you're this tired when they take care of him from morning till evening. Have you been overworking yourself? She asked, her tone laced with condescension. If you had the money and attention I do, your life would be so much more fun. But then again, if I were as clueless as you, I'd have a hard time too. I feel sorry for you. Sarah's husband works away from home, but from what I've heard, he makes a lot of money. She's always dressed in luxurious brand-name clothes and flaunts expensive accessories. But despite all that, she lacks elegance, and whenever I see her, she's constantly bragging about herself, her husband, and her son. She may not be a bad person, but I've never really liked her. Everyone always seems to have something to say, but I just wish she could understand my feelings, even a little. Normally, I would have shrugged off her comments, but that day I was exhausted. I couldn't help but vent about my husband. No, I'm just a housewife, so I'm not tired from work, I admitted, feeling drained. But my husband is always complaining about how busy he is and shows no interest in our son. Lately, he's been so irritated that he even talks about divorce in front of our child. I feel sorry for Tom. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted sharing my frustrations. When I looked at Sarah, her expression had hardened. You're a full-time housewife, and you dare to criticize your husband, the one who provides for your family. I feel sorry for him. Her voice dripped with disdain. I've never complained like that. My husband works hard, and as a wife, it's only natural that you should take good care of your children. This is why women like you struggle. She took the opportunity to look down on me and boast about what a good wife she was compared to me. I knew she would react this way. Maybe it's best not to get too involved with her. I quickly wrapped up the conversation with a polite greeting and hurried home. But that night, to my surprise, Sarah suddenly showed up at my door. I hadn't invited her, but she invited herself in. I'd like to get to know you better, Janet, she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. How about having dinner with me tonight? I love cooking, but my husband is incredibly picky, so I thought I'd visit you now that we're friends and learn some new recipes. Isn't it great that I'm motivated? I'll eat anything, so could you whip something up for us? Without waiting for an invitation, Sarah and her child barged into our home, clearly intending to stay for dinner. My husband, always the friendly one, welcomed them in without a second thought, but it was me who ended up serving them. Sarah's children ran wild, doing whatever they pleased, while she and Harry chatted endlessly, with Sarah proudly boasting about her kids. I was seething inside. We were finally seated at the table, ready to eat, when Sarah brought up our conversation from lunch. Harry, you're really doing your best, you know. You should make sure to remind your wife of that. She turned to me, a smug smile on her face. I told her that since you work so hard, it's only natural that she should take good care of the child. I'm perfect at it for our family. I work hard every day to take care of the house and the kids for my husband. I could never complain about that. Harry looked at me, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Janet, did you really complain to her about this? I can't believe you. We're only getting by because of what I earn. I swallowed my frustration and forced myself to agree. Yes, you're right. Just as I thought the conversation might end there, Sarah suddenly suggested, let's go on a trip to treat your husband. The kids will be graduating soon, and it's perfect timing, don't you think? My husband's working away from home, so my kids are lonely. It'll be more fun with more people. If you're okay with it, I'd love to go with you. I expected Harry to shut down the idea, but to my surprise, he seemed pleased. Sarah had been standing up for him all evening, and now even the kids, pure and innocent, were caught up in the excitement. Everyone except me was in the mood for a trip. Leave all the preparations to Janet, Harry suggested. She's a stay-at-home mom, so she's got all the time in the world for that. I could barely contain my frustration. That's impossible, I finally said. With your salary, we can't afford to pay for a trip for 5 people. Besides, it's a one-parent situation. You're blaming your own son. I can't believe you. Harry's expression darkened. You don't appreciate me enough, do you? You're an absolute disgrace. Sarah, sensing the tension, chimed in. That's right, Janet. You don't appreciate enough at all. Do you even know your own worth? Do you really think you're some great person? Her words cut deep, and I realized just how isolated I had become. I swallowed the words that were on the tip of my tongue, and after apologizing to both of them, reluctantly agreed to plan the trip. Your neighbor is struggling without her husband, so you better handle all the work, Harry said dismissively. I couldn't believe it. Who do you think has been raising our son all on her own? I wanted to shout, but I bit my tongue, trying to suppress my growing frustration. As I began organizing the hotels and planning every detail, it became clear that the trip they wanted would cost several $1,000s. If I spent that kind of money, my savings would be completely wiped out. I've always been the one providing for us, I told Harry. You should at least cover the cost this time. If you don't have it, then go into debt or borrow from your parents, he replied coldly. But remember, if you borrow money, you better be ready to pay it back over a lifetime. No matter what I said, Harry wasn't going to listen. I gave up trying to argue and focused on finding a way to make the trip happen. After some trial and error, using point cards and coupons, I finally managed to plan something within budget. I secured a nice hotel, and Sarah was very pleased with the arrangements. See how great my ideas are, she said to Harry, beaming. I thought of every detail to make sure you could have a wonderful getaway. Even though I had done all the work, Sarah took full credit, speaking as if she had planned everything herself. My husband, of course, was thrilled with her presentation. How useless you are, Janet, he said, a note of contempt in his voice. Sarah is so talented. Shame on you for making me feel like this. I felt the sting of his words, the weight of blame that always seemed to fall on me. This was never the life I had imagined, but still, I couldn't bring myself to consider divorce, not for Tom's sake. I kept telling myself to stay calm as the day of the trip arrived. With Harry and Tom by my side, we headed to the bus station. Oh yay, the bus. Tom's eyes sparkled with excitement. It had been so long since we traveled anywhere. I had the tickets ready, and we waited at the station for Sarah and her kids to arrive. While we were waiting, Tom needed to use the restroom, so I took him quickly, thinking nothing of it. But when we returned, Harry was gone, leaving only our luggage behind. Panic began to set in. Where did he go? And where was Sarah? Time passed, and the bus was about to depart, but Harry was still nowhere to be found. I tried calling him, but there was no answer. With no other options, I decided to call Sarah. Oh, I changed the bus time, Sarah said nonchalantly. I didn't tell you. We got on already. I guess your husband didn't mention it either. He said he wanted to relax and ride on the premium limousine bus, so I switched it. I asked her to pass the phone to Harry, and when my husband finally picked up, his voice was filled with irritation. Honestly, you and Tom just get in the way, he snapped. I'm going to enjoy this trip with Sarah, who actually understands me. I tried to keep my voice steady. Please just wait for us. We'll be there soon. But he cut me off. That's not what I mean. And with that, he hung up, leaving me stunned and heartbroken. I turned to Tom, trying to mask my despair. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I guess we won't be able to go on the trip after all. Tom looked up at me with those innocent eyes, full of understanding. It's okay, Mommy. As long as you're here, it'll be okay. His kindness nearly brought me to tears. I forced a smile and said, let's go home today. I'll take you somewhere better next time, I promised Tom as we headed back home. As we approached our house, I noticed a man in a suit standing at Sarah's door. He looked serious, and I couldn't help but wonder who he was and what he wanted with Sarah. But the last thing I wanted was to get tangled up in her business, so I pretended not to notice him and kept walking. Just as I was about to pass by, the man turned to me and started speaking. I hurried away, unsure of what he wanted, but the encounter left me uneasy. 3 days later, Harry called, his voice filled with urgency. What happened to the hotel payment? Get me $3,000 right now. $3,000? There was no way I could come up with that kind of money. Why didn't you settle the bill in advance? I asked, my frustration boiling over. You're so stupid, he snapped. Come here right now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You asked me to leave, and now you want me to come. I had enough of his nonsense. I got us that hotel through my father's contacts. If I don't go there, they'll charge the regular rate, $3,000. When Harry had told me not to join them on the trip, I had reached out to my father and informed the hotel of the situation. I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me. If you don't pay up now, we're getting a divorce, Harry threatened. Oh really? That's fantastic, I replied, unable to hide the smile spreading across my face. I wanted a divorce anyway. Harry seemed taken aback. Really? Yes, really. It's perfect timing. I'm sure Sarah will be much happier with you. Thanks for doing me a favor. I could practically hear Sarah chiming in, full of smug satisfaction. Unlike some idiot wife, Sarah really understands me. I couldn't help but laugh. Their self-importance was absurd. Well, you have no choice but to pay the hotel fee yourself. Harry fell silent. Of course, he did. His salary was only $700, despite his pretenses of working at a major company. We managed to cover the rent where we live now with passive income from the property I bought when I was still single. Yet Harry only contributed about $300 a month, acting as if that was enough to cover all our food expenses. Honey, you shouldn't lie, I said, my voice tinged with frustration. Have you been lying? You have, haven't you? I can't stay with a man who doesn't make enough money. This means my husband is way better. I said nothing more and handed the phone to the man standing beside me. I'm divorcing you, Janet. You've been cheating on me, haven't you? Why are you there, honey? I thought you were away working. Harry's voice faltered with confusion and panic. To my surprise, the man in the suit who had spoken to me 3 days ago was Sarah's husband, Jack. 3 days earlier, when I returned home after being left behind at the bus stop, Jack had approached me, having just returned from work himself. Upon hearing the situation, Jack had apologized repeatedly and revealed that Harry and Sarah were having an affair. He explained that he had come home unexpectedly to gather evidence of their betrayal. I asked my father to contact the hotel and arrange for pictures to be taken of Sarah and Harry together during their stay. The images show them sharing light kisses, with Sarah clinging to Harry's arm and acting overly affectionate. Seeing Harry so happy and confident with her was sickening. Luckily, I already had the divorce papers, as Harry had previously threatened to divorce me and had thrown the signed papers at me in anger. As soon as I confirmed the affair, I decided to file the papers and finalize the divorce. It was a decision I made after carefully consulting with my child and thinking it through. And then, finally, I was free from Harry. I was told that Sarah's kids weren't at the hotel, so I quickly went searching for them and discovered they had been left at Sarah's parents' house. When Jack arrived to pick them up, he showed Sarah's parents the evidence of the affair and the photographic proof. Overwhelmed with guilt, they apologized to Jack with tears in their eyes. As we awaited a response from Harry and Sarah, who had betrayed both Jack and me, Sarah tried to justify her actions with absurd excuses. She claimed that she pretended to have an affair with Harry to provoke a reaction from me, hoping it would make me change my attitude. Her excuses were pathetic, and it was clear she had orchestrated everything deliberately, leaving her kids behind while planning to enjoy the affair with Harry funded by my money. Jack was deeply apologetic and offered to cover the cost of the trip from his savings, pleading for forgiveness. I couldn't simply accept his apology, though. It wasn't that easy. Harry, meanwhile, was threatened with legal action by the hotel staff for failing to settle the bill. His savings were insufficient, and he had to beg Sarah's parents for help. Eventually, they covered the hotel expenses, allowing him to return home safely. That same day, I hired an attorney to formalize the divorce, seek alimony, request custody of my son, and demand child support. I told Harry, who argued that Tom still needed a father, that he had been neglecting Tom and leaving him behind. It was clear to me that it was not in Tom's best interest to be with him. Jack also managed to secure his divorce without issues. Sarah, who resisted leaving Jack, found herself in a dire situation. She tried to stay in the house but was forced to move out when she couldn't afford the rent. Jack demanded alimony, and Sarah's financial situation deteriorated. She was evicted after staying too long and incurred a penalty fee. She eventually moved back in with her parents, where they were less than pleased with her situation. As for me, I felt a sense of relief and contentment. I could finally live peacefully with my son. I even invited Jack and his kids to stay at the hotel, and seeing the kids' smiling faces made me genuinely happy. I wished this peaceful life could last forever. Call an ambulance. Hurry up. My husband, who always rubbed me the wrong way, collapsed on the floor, drenched in a greasy sweat. The paramedics arrived swiftly, assessing his condition before lifting him onto a stretcher. "Are you his wife?" one of them asked me. "Could you come with us to the hospital?" As my husband lay there on the stretcher, he looked at me with pleading eyes. I met his gaze without wavering. "No, I will not," I replied firmly, without a hint of hesitation. "What?" he murmured, his voice tinged with confusion, as if he couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. "This man is a stranger to me," I continued coldly. "So, I'm not coming." "What?" "Please handle everything else," I said, turning away from him. "Wait, Lydia. Wait," he called out desperately. But I had something else in mind. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an object I had been carrying for days. The moment his eyes fell on it, his face turned ashen. "How dare you treat me like a slave all these years?" I said, my voice steady. "This is my revenge. I will never forgive you. My name is Lydia. I'm a 36-year-old housewife living in a rented apartment with my husband Caleb. We met years ago through a colleague at work when I was still a full-time employee. My colleague, who had many friends, often invited me to social events. Being an introvert, I preferred watching movies or cooking alone, so I usually declined. One day, my colleague convinced me to attend a barbecue. Reluctantly, I agreed. The event was crowded, and I felt out of place until my colleague introduced me to Caleb. He was tanned, clearly an outdoorsy type, quite the opposite of me. But when we started talking, I found him sociable and humorous. Surprisingly, we shared many common interests, just as my colleague had predicted. We exchanged contact information and made plans to meet again. After several outings, we began dating. Caleb proposed after a few years, and we got married. He was always kind, the ideal partner to draw me out of my indoor life. But over the past few years, something changed. Caleb began saying and doing things that left me feeling increasingly uncomfortable. I quit my job to become a housewife because Caleb wanted me to. However, he often made sarcastic remarks about it. One evening, I was late preparing dinner because I had been feeling unwell. When Caleb came home, he immediately noticed. "I'm home, Lydia. Hey, why isn't dinner ready yet?" "Hi, sorry. I wasn't feeling well today, so I rested earlier and couldn't get up in time. Can you take a bath first?" I asked, hoping for some understanding. "Ha! What's that about?" he replied, clearly annoyed. "You're a housewife. You should at least have the meal ready." His lack of concern for my health made me incredibly sad. Another time, I approached him about an upcoming reunion in my hometown. "Hey Caleb, there's a reunion coming up in my hometown. I'll finish my chores, so can I go?" "Suit yourself," he replied indifferently. "Well, being a stay-at-home wife is great, isn't it? I envy you, Lydia. You get to play around with the money your husband makes." Caleb usually treated me well, carrying my purse and bringing me flowers after work. But at times he could be so callous that I wondered if he wanted me to work. I even suggested taking a part-time job, but Caleb insisted that wasn't the case, so I remained a full-time housewife. One day, I received an unexpected call from one of Caleb's relatives. I answered, feeling a bit apprehensive. Lydia, the voice on the other end said urgently, Caleb's mother has collapsed. I froze, shocked by the news. The relative explained that she had visited my mother-in-law a few hours earlier and found her lying in the yard. She called an ambulance, which rushed her to the hospital. Panicking, I quickly got ready and dashed out of the house. When I arrived at the hospital, I was told her condition was still critical. As I was being briefed by the medical staff, Caleb arrived, breathless and frantic. We were escorted to my mother-in-law's room, where she lay in bed, her body connected to various tubes. It was heartbreaking to see. "Mom," Caleb called out softly, but there was no response. Caleb stayed by her side for the rest of the day. I decided to head home to prepare everything needed for the days ahead. I needed to prepare for my mother-in-law's hospital stay, so I gathered everything she might need. After a while, she recovered enough to sit up on her own, but she still struggled to do anything without assistance. I'm glad she's able to sit up, I thought. I wonder if she'll be able to walk again if she continues with her physical therapy. As her discharge date approached, I brought it up with Caleb. Her discharge is next week, I mentioned casually. But Caleb's response caught me off guard. Oh yeah, are you ready? We'll be leaving this house next week, so you better start packing our things. I blinked, confused by what he meant. Caleb noticed my reaction and seemed irritated. We don't need this house anymore since we're moving in with my mom at her place, he said, his tone dismissive. Honestly, you're still as dense as ever. Wait, I said, trying to process his words. Does that mean we're going to live with your mother after she gets out of the hospital? I never heard anything about that. Did you decide this without talking to me? And have you already canceled the lease on this house? Caleb's expression darkened further. Of course, I've already canceled the lease. It's the right thing to do for us as a family to live together and help her. Don't tell me you don't want to live with her, do you? I'm the one who supports this family, so I won't tolerate any complaints. With that, he stumped back to his room, leaving me stunned. I never imagined Caleb would take such a hardline approach, especially without consulting me. I couldn't believe he had already canceled the lease on our apartment. I had no choice but to move out. I knew he was concerned about his mother, but this was overwhelming. I sighed deeply. A few days later, I found myself living with my mother-in-law. I had never been a caregiver before, so everything was new to me. Most of my day was spent feeding, bathing, and helping my mother-in-law with her toileting needs. She didn't want me to take care of her and barely communicated with me. Whenever I tried to talk to her, she would retreat to her bed, claiming she was in pain. When my mother-in-law was healthy, we didn't have a bad relationship. In fact, we would sometimes exchange delicious snacks we found at the department store. But now, it seemed her frailty had overwhelmed her ability to care about anything else. On the other hand, my husband Caleb, who had insisted on us moving in together, was rarely home. After work, he would go out for drinks and return in the early morning. Even on his days off, he always found an excuse to go out. When he did come home, he would lock himself in his room and play video games. One day, I decided to confront him while he was immersed in his games. I know you can't avoid working overtime or socializing with your colleagues, but can't you at least help me take care of your mother when you're at home? Or maybe help out with the housework? I asked. Without even glancing away from the screen, Caleb replied, What are you being so naive about? Housework and caregiving are your jobs. I'm tired from working, you know. Then, as if to emphasize his point, he added, Oh, and I'm almost out of coffee. Go make me some and clean this room, okay? And don't forget to take these to the dry cleaner. I need them by Wednesday. He spoke to me in a dismissive, one-sided manner, tossing his work clothes at me without a second thought. This time, I felt something inside me shift. I couldn't hold back any longer. That's enough, Caleb. I've been doing all the housework and taking care of your mother every single day for the past month without a break. Why can't you help me even a little? Caleb slammed his game controller down on the desk, standing up with an angry glare. How dare you talk to me like that? Who do you think you owe your livelihood to? If you've got a problem with me, then get out. Pack your things and leave. His voice dripped with sarcasm as he added, Well, what about my poor mom? She's going to be left alone with no one to take care of her. His words stung, and I found myself unable to respond. It was true. I had only a small amount of money saved up, and I couldn't bring myself to abandon my mother-in-law, who was completely dependent on me. So allowing my frustration, I picked up his suit and quietly left the room. 6 months passed in this difficult routine. Then one morning, everything changed. When I went to check on my mother-in-law, as I always did, I found that she was no longer breathing. I called an ambulance and rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. Caleb was in tears, but for some reason, I couldn't cry. I felt a strange, cold detachment as I watched him grieve. You didn't do anything to help her, I thought to myself. And then, when I realized I no longer had to take care of her, a wave of relief washed over me. The guilt for feeling this way weighed on me, but I couldn't deny it. Time flew by, and before I knew it, 2 weeks had passed since my mother-in-law's funeral. It was time to organize her belongings. After Caleb left for work, I started cleaning out her room. I carefully placed her favorite clothes and accessories into cardboard boxes. There weren't many, so the task was done quickly. Next, I opened the cabinet by her bedside. It was nearly empty, but on the bottom shelf, there was a large tin. I recognized it. It was an old can of assorted sweets. I had given her the can when she was still in good health. Seeing it there now, I wondered why she had kept it. Curious, I opened the lid and found a letter inside. The envelope had my name on it, written shackily, "Dear Lydia." My heart raced as I quickly opened it and began to read. In trembling letters, there was a message for me. "Lydia, I am sorry for making you take care of me. I was ashamed of myself for burdening you every day. I was also ashamed of my son Caleb. I know how badly he has treated you. Lydia, you should leave him and live your life the way you want." My mother-in-law knew everything, how selfish her son was and how much I was suffering because of it. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I am glad that I was able to spend the last days of my life with you, Lydia. Thank you." In that moment, I cried for the first time since she passed away. All the emotions I had been holding back flooded out of me. I cried and cried until there were no tears left. And then I made up my mind. I would divorce my husband. 10 days had passed since I found the letter from my mother-in-law, but Caleb continued treating me like a servant. "Lydia, I'm missing one of my socks. Where is it? And take my car to the car wash today. You've got nothing else to do, right?" He was going out golfing with his colleagues, completely oblivious that today was our wedding anniversary. Not that I cared anymore. "What are you going to do while I'm gone? You can't just sit around. You need to prepare dinner, clean my room, and scrub the bathroom. You've got plenty to keep you busy." His arrogance left me speechless. "Hey, are you listening? Bring me my sock and a jacket. Hurry up, or I'll be late." Just as he finished barking orders, Caleb suddenly clutched his stomach and collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain and sweating profusely. He gasped for me to call an ambulance, his voice strained as if squeezing out the words. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sadness of the situation, as my husband yelled at me, "Hurry up, you're really useless. Can't even call an ambulance." Strangely, his words made me feel calm. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived, and the paramedics quickly assessed Caleb's condition, placing him on a stretcher. As they prepared to leave, one of them asked, "You're his wife, right? Will you come with us to the hospital?" Caleb looked at me with pleading eyes, but I met his gaze with unwavering resolve and replied, "No, I will not." His voice faltered. "What?" It was as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "This man is a stranger to me now," I said firmly. "I'm not coming. Please take care of the rest." With that, I pulled out something I had been carrying in my pocket for days, divorce papers that Caleb had once forced me to sign during a previous fight, always threatening to serve them if I ever disobeyed him. As he tried to snatch the papers from me, the pain in his body made it impossible for him to move. He slumped back onto the stretcher, defeated. "Excuse me, but please leave now," I told the paramedics, who finally took Caleb away. I watched as the ambulance drove off, likely thinking of him as a poor husband whose wife had just handed him divorce papers. It took some time, but the divorce papers were accepted, and the divorce was officially finalized while Caleb was still in the hospital for a week. As the ambulance left, I knew I was finally free. I was busy packing my belongings and sending them to my parents' house when I unexpectedly ran into Caleb at the grocery store. "Lydia, please don't do this to me," he pleaded. "You love me, don't you? Please don't leave me. I admit I've made mistakes. You always listened to me, no matter what I said, and I just got carried away." The once overbearing attitude he had a few months ago was gone, replaced by a completely pathetic look. "What are you talking about?" I replied coldly. "The divorce is already finalized. It's too late for you to act so fragile. Go ahead, live your life as you please." He looked shocked, as if he hadn't really believed I would go through with a divorce. His hands were shaking, and his face turned pale. "Well, that's that then. Bye." 6 months had passed since our divorce, and Caleb had once shown up at my parents' house. He rang the intercom and called out my name so loudly that I had no choice but to see him. Sure enough, he wanted me to get back together with him. When I stayed silent, he began to spill out details about his current lifestyle. He couldn't cook because he had forced me to do all the housework, so now he lived on TV dinners and takeout. He had gained 10 pounds since the divorce, his face and stomach visibly fuller. He didn't know how to do laundry, so his shirts were wrinkled and smelled strange, making him look even more disheveled. "I finally realized how much you did, Lydia," he said, starting to sob. "If I don't get my act together, the people at work won't like me." But I saw right through those crocodile tears. He just wanted to treat me like a servant again. There was no way I was going back to that. No, never. "If you make any more noise, I'll call the police," I told him, treating him like a stranger. Caleb, clearly afraid of the police, left the house in tears. I was sure he wouldn't bother me again, and I hoped I was right. While my ex-husband seemed to be leading a very inconvenient life, I was living quite comfortably. I had stayed at my parents' house for a while, but now I rented a small apartment and lived alone. My standard of living was lower than when I lived with Caleb, but I loved this new life where I had my own time and space. I had worried about finding another job at my age, but as luck would have it, a friend of mine had a contact who was retiring, and I managed to step into her role. I felt so happy to spend my time and money on myself without anyone telling me what to do. From now on, I was going to take care of myself at my own pace. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life.
I was caught off guard when I found out you weren't staying with us. I didn't make a reservation for you, and my mind went blank with frustration. We're on a family vacation that I never even wanted to go on in the first place, and now we're at a fancy hotel. My husband pretends not to notice the tension and walks away. "We'll see you at checkout, Emily," he says as he heads into the luxurious hotel with everyone else, leaving me behind. My name is Emily, and I just turned 30 this year. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my husband, Spencer, my mother-in-law, Kate, and our son, Sean, who is now 3. Spencer and I met on a blind date 7 years ago, and married shortly after. Our life together has been ordinary and free of major conflicts, and we're known among the neighbors as a loving couple. 2 years after we married, we had Sean. Spencer was busy with work but was always actively involved in childcare. I had no complaints about him, and life was manageable. However, things began to change after Sean was born. 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, and Kate was set to move in with us. The last time I saw her, other than at our wedding, was when Spencer and I visited her to announce our engagement. It had been quite some time, and my first impression of her hadn't been positive. My father-in-law, on the other hand, was always kind to me and left me with a good impression. I remember his concerns about whether I was the right choice for Spencer and his worries that I might cause him trouble. His bluntness about these concerns stung, and although Spencer worked hard to win her approval, Kate's disapproving looks were hard to ignore. We eventually managed to get her approval with some persuasion, but I still resent how openly critical she was in front of me. When Kate and her belongings finally arrived at our house, I was determined to stay positive and do my best to get along with her. I helped her unpack and was relieved to see she was kind to Sean. Spencer and I divided the tasks. He handled the heavy items while I took care of the smaller things. Unpacking went smoothly, until a minor issue arose. "This is supposed to go over here," Kate commented, referring to a fake plant I had placed to brighten up the room. Although I was annoyed by her criticism, I moved the plant to where she wanted it. She then spent some time watching TV and didn't offer any help with the unpacking. I was busy managing Sean and finishing up the packing, but couldn't ask Spencer, who was resting after handling the heavy lifting, for help. I ended up finishing the task with mixed emotions, feeling the strain of trying to keep the peace. Tried to convince myself that Kate was just struggling with the change in her living situation and pushed aside my frustration towards her. However, her criticism persisted daily. One morning, after waking up early to prepare breakfast for everyone, I attempted to take a break. But Kate's voice cut through the quiet. "If you have time to rest, you should be cleaning up the house." She never gave me a moment's peace, constantly criticizing how I did things. Meanwhile, she was rarely home during the day and never seemed to lift a finger herself. The constant strain was wearing me down, so I decided to talk to Spencer about her behavior. "She must be having a hard time adjusting," I said, hoping for some support. But despite knowing how she treated me, Spencer didn't intervene. I would lay in bed each night, my hands on my forehead, overwhelmed and unable to sleep. No matter how I felt, my 3-year-old son would cry at night from the exhaustion. I struggled to get out of bed to comfort him, and Kate, disturbed by the noise, would shake me awake, scolding me for not attending to him sooner. "How can you still be sleeping when your son is crying? It's your job to take care of him," she would yell, berating me for my fatigue and inability to keep up. I didn't want to escalate things, so I quietly got up, but the stress left me with no sleep that night. When Spencer was off work the next day, I planned to cook lunch. Kate, however, had already started preparing the meal. When she placed the food on the table, one plate was noticeably missing. "Looks like one plate is missing," Kate said. "I made it for Spencer, who works hard, and for my grandson. There's none for you. Make your own." I was stunned and hurt. It became glaringly clear that Kate's behavior was more than just criticism. It was deliberate mistreatment. I had been trying to ignore it for a while, but it was impossible to overlook any longer. I struggled to tolerate Kate's behavior, trying to convince myself that she was just being tough on me to make me a better wife. If I didn't keep thinking this way, I would have crumbled under the pressure. Unable to voice my frustrations to Kate directly, I confided in a friend after dropping Scene off at daycare. "That's definitely bullying. How are you holding up?" she asked, genuinely concerned. I detailed everything to my childhood best friend, who listened with empathy. Her concern and support overwhelmed me, and I finally broke down in tears. I had been battling my frustrations alone for too long. She reassured me that I was doing my best and that things would get better. "I'll help you. We'll figure something out," she promised. Although our conversation was brief because we both had commitments, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. My friend suggested a couple of things. One idea was to use a recording device to capture what was being said in the house. On my way to pick up Scene, I bought a cheap recorder. When I got home, I found Kate out as usual and took the opportunity to set up the recorder discreetly. While cleaning, I noticed a piece of paper that had fallen from a drawer in Kate's room. When I picked it up and unfolded it, I discovered it was a personal loan agreement for $20,000. I could hardly believe what I was seeing, but I decided it might be useful and tucked the paper into my pocket. After a while, Kate returned, and soon Spencer came home just in time for dinner. As we sat around the table, Kate began her usual complaints. Then out of the blue she mentioned, "By the way, my friend gave me a discount coupon for a one-night stay at a 5-star spa hotel." Her mention of the coupon seemed like a hint that she wanted to go. Spencer was enthusiastic about the idea, and even Scene seemed excited. I, on the other hand, wasn't thrilled and braced myself for what I anticipated would be an unpleasant experience. "Well, since you're here and you work so hard, you might as well join us," Kate said. I was taken aback. Hearing such an offer from someone who had been so critical of me was astonishing. Part of me wondered if she meant well, though I struggled to believe her offer wasn't made with some ulterior motive. She wanted to book everything for the next day. That night, I couldn't sleep, trying to decide what to do. By morning, I was still conflicted. I sat for a long time, pondering the trip. Scene wanted to go, but since Mom wouldn't be able to watch him, and it would be difficult to take him with me alone. Needed Spencer's help. "You don't support me when your mother mistreats me." I don't want to go, I said. Spencer was at a loss for words. He knew I was right and was caught between wanting to please his mother and addressing my concerns. He pleaded with me to reconsider, so I decided to set a condition. Fine, but first, take a look at this, I said, showing him the loan agreement I had found in Kate's room. Spencer's face went pale as he read the document, revealing Kate's $20,000 debt. He was shocked and couldn't believe his mother was in such financial trouble. Can we help her pay this off? As her son, I can't just ignore it, he asked, knowing that I was responsible for managing our finances. Of course, I replied, understanding the complexity of the situation. I declined Kate's offer. I had no intention of helping someone who had treated me poorly. I understood Spencer's feelings as a son, but I couldn't agree to support Kate under those circumstances. I told Spencer, I will help you with this trip, but only if you agree to my conditions. The first condition was that Spencer must intervene whenever Kate mistreated or overly criticized me. The second was that I would establish some ground rules for Kate, write them down, and post them around the house. If Kate couldn't agree to these conditions, we would have to ask her to leave. Spencer agreed to these terms, and we decided to implement them after the trip. I asked my friend to post the rules while we were away. We would continue to act normally until the trip was over, and then we'd put our plan into action. Spencer agreed, and I decided to go on the trip with them. The next day, I informed Kate that I would be joining them. I kept reminding myself to be patient just a little longer. On the day of the trip, Spencer handled everyone's bags as we prepared to leave the house. Kate's bullying began immediately. You don't need to carry the bags. Let Emily do it, she said. Spencer glanced at me apologetically, and I complied, believing it was better to avoid conflict. However, the bags were extremely heavy, and managing them while taking care of Scene left me exhausted. The journey involved taking an Amtrak train followed by a drive over a mountain road to the hotel. The exterior and interior of the hotel were stunningly luxurious. Scene was thrilled, exploring every corner, while Kate admired the decor and checked us in at the front desk. As I grabbed my bag and prepared to head to our room, Kate's next words took me by surprise. Were you planning to stay with us? I only made a reservation for the three of us. I was stunned and speechless. It became clear that Kate had invited me on this trip solely to serve as a porter and never intended for me to stay. Gradually, the reality of the situation sunk in. I asked Kate, then where should I sleep? Her response was dismissive. I don't know and I don't care. Why don't you just camp out in the woods? I was taken aback. She had invited me on this trip only to suggest that I sleep outside. I was seething with anger, and I almost shouted at her, but she and my family had already disappeared down the hallway. I'll see you at checkout time, Kate called back over her shoulder. Left standing alone in the lobby, I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. I had suspected there was a catch, but being forced to camp out was beyond what I had imagined. Tears welled up in my eyes as I made my way out of the hotel. Spencer sent a brief message saying, "I'm sorry." I was too hurt and angry to respond. After noon, I found a cafe for lunch and later stumbled upon an open field where I could see the sunset. Just as I settled in, my friend called, "Hey, how's the trip going?" But you asked. I had given her a duplicate key and informed her of the situation beforehand. She was furious and offered to come pick me up, but I declined. I appreciated her offer, but I knew leaving now would mean Kate getting exactly what she wanted. Unsure of what Kate might do next, I decided to consult a lawyer. I sent him the evidence of the mistreatment, preparing to pursue a case for emotional abuse. If it turned out that Kate's actions were premeditated, she would be asked to leave after the trip. I couldn't find a legal claim, but I had solid evidence that should have supported my case. The lawyer assured me that I had grounds to proceed if I chose to. After the call, the mental and physical exhaustion hit me hard, and I collapsed onto the fresh grass. I spent the night in an open field with a stunning view and a cool breeze, feeling both the beauty and the weight of the situation. The next morning, I met up with Kate and my family just in time for checkout. "Emily, did you actually sleep in the woods? I bet you didn't even clean up. You're so filthy," Kate sneered. Spencer tried to intervene, but Kate quickly shifted the topic. It was clear he had mentioned that pushing me out was excessive. Kate gushed about how nice the hotel had been, but Sean's smile was my only comfort as we headed home. Once we arrived, Kate immediately began to yell, "What's all this? Don't mess with me." Rules were posted all over the house, and it was evident she had seen them as her face flushed with anger. When Spencer showed her the IO, her face went pale and her mouth fell open in shock. At first, she tried to deny everything, but when pressed, she confessed to squandering her husband's life insurance money and borrowing more once it ran out. Spencer and I proceeded with our plan. "I can't have someone with debt living with us," I said. "You need to leave. And since I have evidence of how you've mistreated me, I will be suing you." I played the recording for her. As she listened, her face turned ghostly white, and she begged me to let her stay. I told her she could remain if she adhered to the rules and refrained from aggressive behavior. She eagerly agreed and apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry. Please help me." I never thought I'd see her like this, I thought, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. When I thought the ordeal was finally over, my knees gave way, and I collapsed to the floor. Spencer quickly helped me into a chair and then began to confront Kate about her debts. It was clear that his respect and trust in her had shattered. Kate, who had never imagined facing such a fierce rebuke from her son, frantically apologized. Once everything was settled, she fell silent, staring blankly at the sky for the rest of the day. The atmosphere in our home changed dramatically the next morning. I woke up early as usual and started preparing breakfast. Kate, however, made a cutting remark right away. The difference was in Spencer's response. "Mom, we talked about this yesterday," he said firmly, causing Kate to fall silent and retreat to the sofa. I almost felt a pang of amusement at the sight, but I managed to stay focused on preparing breakfast. Spencer was grappling with guilt for not protecting me and struggling to stand up to his mother. Despite this, I knew he was a kind man, and there must have been reasons for his previous inaction. I couldn't bring myself to hate him for it. He tearfully apologized to me, and from then on, he supported me and kept a closer watch on Kate. Her attitude toward me improved daily. While she still made occasional comments, they lacked malice. I hoped this new dynamic would last. For the first time, I could breathe easily and maintain a healthy mindset. The debt repayment was set at $700 a month. Spencer and I worked together to manage it as Kate was too elderly to work. I took a part-time job to balance work and home life, and Kate took responsibility for taking Sean to and from daycare. She did a good job with this. Spencer took over managing the family finances, which helped improve our situation little by little. No matter how much you love your husband, dealing with a difficult mother-in-law can make you consider divorce. Although I couldn't bring myself to do that, I reflected on how much easier life could have been if I had acted sooner. Still, finding that Io was a turning point that helped me rebuild my family. I was grateful to my friend for her support and encouragement. Without her, I might have faced a mental breakdown. I deeply cherish our friendship. Looking back, I feel a sense of accomplishment for holding my family together through the tough times. Even when I was exhausted and unmotivated, I made sure to fulfill my responsibilities to ensure a decent life for everyone. Though I may never fully forgive Kate, I intend to treat her kindly as my mother-in-law. Years have passed and my son has started preschool. We are nearing the end of paying off the debt and considering a move to a new house. Kate has begun helping me more, and my relationship with Spencer has improved significantly. We're even contemplating having another child. Our family is stable now, and I'm content with our progress. I will continue to do my best for my family, always striving to support and nurture them.